My reaction to any Winds of Winter announcement is the equivalent of Mr. President. A second plane has just hit the tower. And you can't blame me, man. We've been waiting for this book for like 13 years. Like, it's crazy. 13 years. 13 years is the age of consent in Westeros, kinda, I think. I don't know. You can literally drive in certain countries at the age of 13, probably. Also, I don't know, in some places. Daenerys Targaryen was literally 13 years at the start of the Game of Thrones books. So needless to say, the Winds of Winter announcement is going to be huge. And we may be getting really close to the Winds of Winter announcement. So let's get into all of the information we have. And yeah, make sure to like and subscribe. Now, the last professional George R.R. Martin progression update was in late 2022. And George confirmed how much he was doing with the books and how much he thought he had completed at that time.
And I think I'm about 3/4 of the way done. I'm done with some of the characters. You know, the characters all interweave.
Sure.
So I've actually finished with a couple of the characters. I got their whole story, but not others. So I have to finish all that weaving, but it's still going to take me a while. And
so 10 years to go 75% of the way through means
that's depressing. That's depressing. Yes.
Okay, all right. So 3 more years.
There was an update also last year, like on a podcast or whatever, and he basically gave the same update. He completed the exact same amount of pages. But in 2024, it's a whole different ballgame, man. 2024 is a different year. We all know it. We all feel it. In 2024, we already had Kendrick Lamar versus Drake. We had the TikTok Riz party. So all of the stars are aligning perfectly for a Winds of Winter announcement. Now, I want to talk about like the oldest one first. I want to go chronologically. You feel me? The oldest one came from George R.R. Martin's blog post. This came out on March 11, 2024 at 6:07. George probably just woke up and thought, hey, let's screw around with my fan base even more, and release this blog post. Now, when I first saw this, I was like, I honestly thought this was like a suicide note or something. I was like, I knew it. I knew we pushed this man too far. But turns out it was just like a cool little quote. Dreams only have one owner at a time. That's why dreamers are lonely. And yeah, Martin Luther King couldn't even write this quote, man. This one is fire. Now, dreams obviously have a lot to do with the books. The last book is already confirmed to be called A Dream of Spring. But that's not the only thing that had me questioning this blog post and my sexuality. The thing that got me, and a lot of others as well, is the whole words of wisdom thing, which sounds very familiar to the Winds of Winter. And not just that, but this whole blog post is honestly very like parallel to a Dance with Dragons blog post that happened when that book released. And it's some really juicy stuff.
Winds of Winter, words of wisdom. A blue rose has a lot of significance in our story, does it not? And then the quote from William Faulkner he shares is, dreams have only one owner at a time. That's why dreamers are lonely. His current mood is contemplative, and the tags are dreams and writing. The last time, this is where it gets fun. The last time George posted something like this, he posted a picture of King Kong and said Kong is dead. And he was referring to King Kong, the monkey on his back, being Dance with Dragons. So when he finished it, he tweeted that. And it was exactly 4 months after he met with his British publishers. The day this was posted was 4 months after he met with his British publishers this past summer, or this past winter or fall, whatever. So that's where I said, okay, that's a little strange.
That's how crazy us fans have gotten, man. It's all your fault, Mr. Martin. All your fault. All it took was something that just sounded like the name we wanted for all of us just to think like, yeah, it's gonna come out tomorrow. But luckily, this is far from the only clue we got this year, people. In fact, literally not too long ago, we got this cryptic message again. June 19th, 2024 at 9:04 a.m. George probably just finished morning sex with his missus, and the post nut clarity told him to post something on his blog again. And I need to let people think I'm working on this book, even though he's been probably playing like Elden Ring and Overwatch for the last decade. But still, we do have to talk about it because it is big. Ladies and gentlemen, we see the name again. Words of Wisdom. And we also have a quote again. Far and away, the best prize that life has to offer is a chance to work hard at work worth doing. I don't know about you, but this is some shit my grandma would post on like Facebook. Like George is definitely going through his like edgy adult phase right now, man. But this again had people ready for an announcement.
I might be convinced.
Preach it.
That wins a winner. It might be done. It actually might.
I think I'm far and away the best prize that life has to offer is the chance to work hard and work worth doing. Good old Teddy Roosevelt, and he's got a little alien winking, almost like, "Hey, I know you guys out there are gonna break it down."
And the last one had a blue rose, which is very significant to A Song of Ice and Fire, obviously.
True.
And then for him to then use WOW again, Words of Wisdom again, with the winky face, with writing in the tags, life and death once again. So I'm of the belief, one, that these are no longer coincidences. I think that George is trying to signal at something. And I'll go as far as this. I almost feel like he's in final edits. I think he might be in final edits, bro. And being hopeful costs me absolutely nothing. But now it has gone beyond just being like, haha, whimsically optimistic to being like, okay, all right, something's happening. Something is actually happening here.
And yeah, the little alien thing that George posted, that's like George saying, yeah, I know you want me. I know I have something that you want, bitch. And it's like, yes, Mr. Martin, can we please just have this book already, man? But still, if you're someone who thinks this is a bit delusional, jokes aside, we are entering territory where I don't think you can call this a coincidence anymore. George R.R. Martin said he's also going to be attending Worldcon this year. And this year's Worldcon takes place right after we finish House of the Dragon. And George R.R. Martin and the Winds of Winter have a really interesting history when it comes to this event.
The biggest red flag for me, that being Martin saying that he's going to Worldcon. Worldcon is a science fiction convention that I think meets annually. I'm not sure. I've never been. I'd like to go. But Martin has gone to it many times in the past, and the last time he went in 2019, he said that if he did not finish Dragons, The Winds of Winter by 2020 Worldcon in New Zealand, his fans had his permission to imprison him in a cage above a lake of acid until he did finish it. The fact that he is going back to Worldcon so many years later after that 2020 Worldcon was canceled because of the pandemic could signal something good. There have been Worldcons in the years since the pandemic. I believe there was one last year and the year before that. The fact that he is making an appearance and had made this promise the last time could be something positive. I think that I don't know, he could, but I doubt that he would show up after making such a promise and at least not be prepared to address it with at least more of an update, maybe a sample chapter, or more likely, or maybe I'm just hoping for it, an actual announcement.
If George R.R. Martin comes to this year's Worldcon and announces The Winds of Winter, let's just say he's not going to be the only one that's coming. But to say this is all just a willy-nilly coincidence, you gotta admit, this is sounding a bit strong right now, At least give me that. You don't have to give me everything. You don't have to say The Winds of Winter is coming out next year or this year or in fact this month. In fact, it already came out. We just didn't see it. George R.R. Martin already shadow dropped it. No, I'm not going for all of that. But at what point do you start thinking, yeah, maybe we are getting a little bit on the optimism side, and the optimism is actually justified. You know what I mean? And let's be honest. Why would George outshine House of the Dragon? It would be pretty smart for him to just use the House of the Dragon's finale and then drop the announcement. That's like a god level marketing move right there. Now there are a few things that we can't talk about. If you didn't know, there's a leak or a rumor that an author from New Mexico ordered a dragon cake for some sort of release party. I'm not gonna talk about that too much, simply because there's not like much there. But it is actually like kind of funny. Like, imagine this is how everything gets leaked, and imagine being the guy who found this out. Not saying it's impossible, but man, I'd be mad as hell if my book got leaked for some dumbass cake I ordered for a party I'm gonna throw. But either way, if you want to count this, count it. If you don't, there's still no harm done. And in case you were wondering, I do think this whole cake thing is like 70% likely. But whatever. Let's move on to some more like juicy and more like accurate news on the Winds of Winter. So if you didn't know, there was a new Game of Thrones spin-off based on the Dunk and Egg tales that George R. R. Martin created. And George kind of accidentally leaked his like very last date that the Winds of Winter can be released. And he did this because the Dunk and Egg series, very similar to Game of Thrones, well, I hate to say it, it's not finished. It's not goddamn finished. Like, come on, George. We know you can't finish the main timeline, but at least finish the Dunk and Egg series before you make the exact same mistake again this time. Like, you can't just start having sex and say, alright baby, I'll come back in 4 years and finish. Like, we are getting a repeat of the final season of Game of Thrones again with this whole Dunk and Egg thing, where the HBO writers might have to finish it for him and it's gonna be terrible, and Luke Skywalker comes and saves Dunk and Egg, and the Seven Kingdoms are no longer Seven Kingdoms and they are one kingdom under the Mad Queen Daenerys or something. Like, it's gonna be bad. However, George has said that he believes that he will finish more Dunk and Egg pages or novellas before the end of season 3 of that show. And George said that he will only work on that book after he finishes the Winds of Winter. The Winds of Winter is his priority.
As am I. But one thing that is worth noting is he talks about writing more Dunk and Egg stories. And he talks about doing so after he's finished the Winds of Winter. He does so in very definitive terms. I think that having that definitive term is good that Martin is kind of thinking that far ahead. Specifically that he says he will write them before the show gets to them. If Dunk and Egg takes an alternating schedule to House of the Dragon, that would have the 4th season of Dunk and Egg, that being the series, the one by which Martin would have needed to release a new Dunk and Egg book. I believe that'd be coming out in about 2029, so yay, wins by 2029.
So needless to say, that's some big confirmation that we are going to get the Winds of Winter before the end of the show at the very latest. And I mean, like, I'll take that. And there is something small that I didn't mention because this happened like last December. George R. R. Martin talked to his British publishers not that long ago.
While George R. R. Martin has been over in Europe for the last few weeks, he said he found time to go meet with his British publishers to discuss the Wildcards, A Song of Ice and Fire, and of course the Winds of Winter. Although this might not mean anything, I can't help but be excited by the thought of them discussing its release. I'm sure they're wanting to know exactly how much he has done, and when he thinks he will finally have an official release date. I would actually not be shocked if they decide they will need to divide the novels into halves like they did with A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons. Based on George R. R. Martin's recent update, he said he's written over 1,100 pages so far. One day they might just decide it's best if he releases what he already has done, since they've been waiting for over a decade as well.
But who knows, that could just be a cookbook or something, or worst case scenario, hear me out. This is probably the most likely. He told his British publishers, yeah, that book ain't never coming out, son. He probably just told his British publishers to find new jobs because that book is long gone and it ain't never coming out. Now, if you want my honest opinion, I think we will get the Winds of Winter in 2027. I've been saying this for a while. Maybe 2028 and at the very latest 2029. Which would be really cool because that would be 10 years after the Game of Thrones finale, which, you know, where we got things like this absolute gem.
And who has a better story than Bran the Broken?
Alright, I'll stop showing that clip in all of my Game of Thrones videos. But either way, all of these leaks do make me rethink my stance on the whole 2027 prediction. And it gets me thinking about like 2026 and maybe even 2025. Like imagine getting GTA 6 and The Winds of Winter in the same year. That's God rewarding us for our good behavior. And I do think George is getting his hand back in writing a lot. I mean, The Winds of Winter is a big book regardless.
You know, the biggest books so far were the third volume, Storm of Swords, and the fifth volume, Dance with Dragons. Those were both about 1,500 pages of manuscript.
Yep.
This one's going to be bigger than either of that.
So that does make sense that it's going to take him a lot longer. But this long is a bit like too much, you know. But if you do the math, you would realize that in 2022, he said that he is 75% done. And since then, he's barely been working on like projects. He worked on like Elden Ring that came out like way before that announcement. He barely did any marketing for like season 2 of House of the Dragon. And he's been like an overall like good boy recently. Like it's pretty obvious that he's on the Sigma Male grind set right now. For at least like the last 8 months he's been on it. And I can see why people have optimism and not being like delusional for the first time in years. I genuinely think he's probably like 85% done The Winds of Winter. And if I had to guess, I would say that number could jump up to like 92% done. So I truly think he will be done probably by the end of next year, assuming World War III doesn't happen. And after that, it's just like editing and marketing and like translating, and we will finally get this book and to see if that Jon Snow motherfucker is dead or not. But yeah, new video on House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones and The Song of Ice and Fire coming out like usual. This is just a kind of like a compilation of everything we know about The Winds of Winter, or like the recent updates about The Winds of Winter. And I think they are like so much more positive than anything we got in like years, man. Like I've actually have like hope for the first time in a long time. But yeah, that's it for this video. Like, subscribe, and peace.